The engine of the moving truck was still idling as the police cruiser arrived. I had been at my inherited lake cabin for no more than 5 minutes when an impeccably groomed woman in expensive heels was already marching down the pier with a phone glued to her ear. "Yes, officer, he's here. The soldier vagabond I warned you about." The aroma of diesel fumes mingled with the scent of pine as onlookers gathered on their porches to observe the spectacle. The sound of gravel shifting beneath the officer's boots felt like a countdown as he neared me with an expression that conveyed this call was anticipated. "Sir, I must ask you to leave the property at once. There's a restraining order." Standing there, mortified before an entire community, I saw my childhood haven being usurped by an HOA president who believed she could bully a former soldier. She was completely unaware that she had just started a confrontation with the wrong veteran. My name is Brock Steele, and following 22 years of serving my nation, I believed I had earned a quiet retirement. I was on the verge of discovering that some conflicts can pursue you even after your service ends. The lake cabin had belonged to my family since 1965, when my uncle Jasper, a Korean War veteran with hands as tough as leather and a heart of gold, constructed it one plank at a time. Every summer of my youth was passed on that weathered dock, where I learned to tie military knots and listen to tales of war infused with the scent of Old Spice and pipe tobacco. When he passed away last spring, he bequeathed to me the only possession that truly mattered, our family's piece of heaven. The distinct, musty odor of his old fishing gear still hung in the air of the workshop, blended with the smells of sawdust and machine oil. My intention was to live out my retirement there, repairing boats for the local residents, and finally delving into all the books I had carried with me through 3 deployments. These were uncomplicated ambitions for an uncomplicated man subsisting on a master sergeant's pension. However, Willowbrook Lake was no longer the serene fishing village Uncle Jasper had known. Beginning around the year 2000, developers started to develop the hillsides, constructing $500,000 McMansions that seemed to be straight from a suburban design book. The original families, Uncle Jasper's contemporaries, continued to reside in their humble cabins along the water's edge, but they were gradually being encircled. That was when she made her entrance. Delilah Thornbridge descended upon our community in 2018 like an impeccably groomed whirlwind. Every aspect of her persona projected wealth, from her white Mercedes to her designer footwear that tapped on the wooden pier like a ticking clock. She had wed Rex Thornbridge, a regional contractor who had amassed a fortune during the housing boom. Together, they had acquired the largest lakefront mansion that money could procure. Within a mere 6 months, she had managed to get elected as HOA president, making promises to raise the community's aesthetic benchmarks. The afternoon sun filtering through the dusty panes of my cabin's windows suddenly seemed endangered by her concept of progress. The initial assault arrived precisely 1 week prior to my scheduled move-in date. As I was packing my truck, a certified letter was delivered, as dense as a legal document and doubly as menacing. The return address was for the Willowbrook Lake Homeowners Association, written in gold-embossed lettering that likely cost more than my monthly housing payment. "Dear Mr. Steele," it started, oozing with feigned courtesy, "your property has been flagged for non-compliance with the prevailing community aesthetic standards. Before occupancy can be granted, the subsequent mandatory upgrades must be finalized." The list of requirements was more extensive than my final deployment orders: a new roof, refreshed siding, professional landscaping, dock maintenance, and window replacements. The projected cost was $15,000 for a cabin that Uncle Jasper had flawlessly maintained for 57 years. I promptly dialed the number provided on the letterhead. "Willowbrook Lake HOA, this is Delilah." Her voice possessed a specific type of sweetness that concealed a malicious intent. "Ma'am, this is Brock Steele. I'm calling about the letter I received." "Oh yes, the military property," she interrupted, as if I were a contagion. "I'm certain you can appreciate, Mr. Steele, that we cannot permit subpar properties to diminish the investment value of our community. It's possible you would feel more at home in one of those veteran housing communities on the other side of town." The creak of Uncle Jasper's floorboards beneath my feet conveyed a narrative different from Delilah's stipulations. These were not infractions. They were features that gave the place its character. The hand-hewn beams, the stone fireplace constructed from rocks gathered from the lake itself, the screened-in porch where 3 generations of my family had learned the art of cleaning fish. But character is not something that appears on an HOA compliance form. The upgrades are not open to negotiation, she went on. Inability to finish them within 30 days will lead to legal measures to block occupancy. I trust you will make the wisest decision for all parties. The line went silent. Standing in Uncle Jasper's workshop, encompassed by tools that had crafted something magnificent from scratch, I understood that this was not about property values or community benchmarks. This was an effort to wipe out history to create space for another person's ideal of perfection. Delilah Thornbridge had initiated a conflict with the wrong soldier. Delilah moved quickly. 3 days following our telephone conversation, a process server appeared at my residence, carrying legal documents that made my past deployment orders seem like friendly correspondence. An emergency injunction, an immediate cease and desist order, a violation of community aesthetic covenants. She had retained the services of Blackstone and Associates, the type of law firm that bills $400 an hour just to pick up the phone. Their letterhead was so substantial it could have served as body armor. But there's a lesson learned from 22 years in the armed forces. An adversary's initial move is seldom their strongest. It is typically frantic, conspicuous, and intended to incite panic. Thus, while Delilah was using her husband's funds on legal counsel, I was passing my morning at the county courthouse, equipped with only a notepad and the patience Uncle Jasper had instilled in me during our extended fishing excursions. The courthouse basement had the scent of old documents and unfulfilled aspirations, but it was also the repository for public records. And public records, in contrast to HOA presidents, do not fabricate information. Can I assist you, dear? The clerk appeared as though she had been managing documents since the Carter presidency. Yes, ma'am. I need to look into property deeds and the formation documents for the Willowbrook Lake HOA. For hours later, amidst boxes that had not been exposed to daylight since the Clinton era, I discovered something valuable. Uncle Jasper's original deed, filed in 1965, indicated clear ownership without any restrictions, covenants, or, most certainly, any HOA supervision, because the HOA was not established until 2003, a full 38 years after Uncle Jasper had already secured his property rights. The legal concept was straightforward. Grandfathered property rights take precedence over any HOA regulations established subsequently. Delilah's high-priced lawyers had constructed their argument on a flimsy foundation. But the more significant discovery was located deeper within the records. Rex Thornbridge's construction firm had been given an $80,000 contract for HOA road maintenance in 2022. There was no competitive bidding process, no alternative quotes, just a perfunctory endorsement from his wife's HOA board. The lingering taste of stale courthouse coffee became unpleasant in my mouth as the situation became clear. This was not merely about my cabin. It was about institutionalized corruption. Finding everything you need, son? The clerk had ambled over, likely curious as to why someone would spend an entire day in the municipal basement. More than I anticipated, I responded, making photocopies of everything I could manage. It was then that I encountered my first supporter. Mavis Kettleworth was in the parking lot, having difficulty retrieving her walker from an old Honda Civic that seemed more ancient than my military career. At 78, she had the deliberate movements of someone who had been combating bureaucracy for longer than I had been on this earth. "You're Jasper's nephew," she stated, not as a query, but as a fact. "I heard that Thornbridge woman is causing you problems." "Yes, ma'am. I'm just attempting to figure out my legal avenues." Mavis chuckled, a sound reminiscent of gravel churning in a cement mixer. "Son, I worked as a paralegal for 43 years before I retired. I'm familiar with every property disagreement in this county's past, and I know precisely what that woman is attempting to do." The tapping of her walker on the pavement created a rhythm of hope as she detailed how developers had used HOAs as a tool to push out long-standing residents. Property values would increase, taxes would escalate, and soon, families who had resided in an area for generations could no longer afford to live there. "Your uncle was a founding resident of this community," Mavis remarked, her gaze sharp behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "That deed you discovered? It holds more weight than any HOA rule. But you'll require assistance in navigating the legal maze." "What sort of assistance?" "The kind that is provided at no cost. because some of us recall a time when this lake was centered on family, not on investment opportunities. That night, I laid out Uncle Jasper's Purple Heart and my research materials on his kitchen table. The figures revealed a narrative that made my gut twist. Delilah had secured a temporary restraining order that barred me from moving in until a court date set for 3 weeks later. 3 weeks of motel expenses would deplete my savings more rapidly than a Humvee consumes diesel. But I had also discovered the evidence I required. Here is a piece of information all property owners should be aware of. Always verify the recording date of your deed against the formation date of any HOA. Earlier deeds frequently hold superior rights that cannot be negated by subsequent restrictions. My phone vibrated with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Heard you're making trouble for some very important people. You might want to rethink your stance. A friend. I had faced threats from actual terrorists. A few anonymous text messages from an HOA president weren't going to disrupt my sleep. However, they did reveal something significant. Delilah was fearful enough to use intimidation. And fearful adversaries are prone to errors. I saved the text, adding it to my expanding file of evidence, and prepared myself for what I now understood would be a prolonged conflict. Uncle Jasper had taught me the value of patience during those summer fishing trips. It was now time to apply those lessons. Outside, a loon's cry echoed across the lake that I could not yet legally consider my home. But I was nearer to that goal than Delilah realized. 2 weeks into my mandated stay at the Lake View Extended Stay, a place with no view of the lake and a dubious interpretation of extended, Delilah executed her subsequent maneuver. A flyer for an emergency community meeting was placed in every mailbox, printed on cardstock, so pricey it likely had its own unique identifier. The community center had the aroma of industrial-grade carpet cleaner and the lingering scent of countless potluck meals. The squeak of folding chairs on the linoleum floor filled the air as residents took their seats, most of them appearing as if they would prefer to be somewhere else. Delilah was positioned at the front, equipped with a laptop and a presentation style capable of selling anything to anyone. "Thank you all for attending at such short notice," she started, her voice a perfect mix of concern and command. "We are confronted with a crisis that jeopardizes all that we have accomplished together." A crisis, indeed, as if Uncle Jasper's cabin were a matter of national security. Her PowerPoint presentation was named Preserving Our Investment Value, a Community Plan. Each slide was more absurd than the one before it. Property values, aesthetic benchmarks, security improvement initiatives. The entire event felt like a marketing presentation veiled in scare tactics. This leads me to our pressing security issues. Delilah advanced to a slide that caused my blood pressure to rise. Recent events have indicated a need for heightened protection for our community. I am suggesting a special assessment of $25,000 per household to finance these essential upgrades. A wave of anxious coughs spread through the room. Harold Finch, the HOA treasurer, fidgeted in his chair as if it were on fire. There was something in his demeanor that brought to mind soldiers caught pilfering from the kitchen. I had attended this meeting in my full dress uniform. A bit of psychological maneuvering couldn't hurt. The array of ribbons and medals had the desired impact. Several attendees were casting surreptitious glances my way, likely contemplating why a supposed dangerous veteran appeared so formal. Before we approve any assessments, I rose, my voice resonating with the authority gained from 2 decades of command. I would like to formally request an inspection of the HOA's financial documents. As property owners, we are entitled to that right. Delilah's smile was sharp enough to cut through glass. "Mr. Steele, given that you are not yet an official resident." Actually, Mavis's walker tapped on the floor as she stood. "Any property owner within the HOA's jurisdiction has the legal right to review financial records upon providing proper notice. This is in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, which this association professes to adhere to." The underlying motive began to surface as Delilah fumbled her response. Rex's firm was slated to perform all the security installations, the same Rex whose prior contract had mysteriously cost $80,000 for road work that Uncle Jasper's fishing companions insisted had never occurred. Harold appeared to be on the verge of developing an ulcer. When questioned about the financial records, he muttered something about recent changes and system updates. In other words, someone had been getting very creative with the community's finances. Here is a financial tip every HOA member should be aware of. You possess the legal right to examine the financial records of your HOA. Submit a written request with a 10-day notice period, and any denial to comply can be a basis for legal proceedings. Following the meeting, a noteworthy event transpired. 3 residents approached me in the parking lot, their movements akin to a clandestine maneuver. "That was courageous of you in there," whispered Dorothy Millhouse, a retired educator who seemed as though she could still command a room full of unruly students with a single look. "A few of us have had our doubts about those finances for some time now." Rex's work teams arrive, create a great deal of commotion, and then vanish, added Frank Morrison, whose calloused hands bespoke years of genuine hard work. "Most of the time, we can't even tell what they've actually accomplished." The third ally was Janet Polk, whose land adjoined mine. "Delilah visited our home last month, acting very amicable, and inquired if we might consider selling. She mentioned having investors willing to pay more than the market rate for specific properties. The situation was starting to become clear, like a strategic plan being laid out. This wasn't about community aesthetics or safety. It was about displacing residents on fixed incomes to sell their properties to investors for vacation rentals. Uncle Jasper's cabin wasn't merely an obstacle. It was the final component Delilah required to gain control of the entire lakefront. That evening, back in my bleak motel room that smelled of antiseptic and shattered hopes, I laid out the evidence on the synthetic bed covering. Discrepancies in the HOA's finances, Rex's no-bid contracts, Delilah's enigmatic investors, anonymous intimidating texts, the clatter of ice from the old vending machine down the corridor marked the rhythm of my strategic thinking. I was up against an organized corrupt operation with only my military pension and whatever pro bono legal assistance Mavis could offer. It was a classic David versus Goliath scenario. Only Goliath had a team of lawyers, and my slingshot was fashioned from public records. But I had learned something crucial tonight. Delilah's base of support was not as firm as she projected. Fissures were appearing in her flawless community image. People were beginning to ask questions. My phone vibrated. "Impressive uniform tonight. A shame it won't be of any use when the bank repossesses your property. A friend." I took a screenshot of the message and added it to my evidence collection. "Keep it up," I thought. "Every threat you make strengthens my position." Outside my window, Willowbrook Lake shimmered under the moonlight, tranquil and lovely. Somewhere on the other side of that water, Uncle Jasper's cabin was waiting for me to return home. Soon. Monday morning introduced a fresh form of harassment that would have impressed even the most imaginative drill instructors I had encountered. An official county vehicle was parked in Uncle Jasper's driveway when I passed by for my routine check. A building inspector, holding a clipboard and wearing the expression of someone performing a favor, was on the scene. The lingering scent of Rex's cigar smoke hung around the cabin's front porch, like clues at a crime scene. A coincidence? About as probable as discovering honest politicians in the Capitol. "Sir, I must ask you to stay back," the inspector stated as I came closer. His name tag identified him as Gary Millstone, and his handshake was like grasping a limp fish. An anonymous tip regarding structural integrity. Very grave violations. Anonymous, of course. I was certain it had no connection to the white Mercedes I had seen departing the vicinity 20 minutes prior. The infractions Gary listed would have been amusing if they were not jeopardizing my inheritance. Unsafe dock supports. Uncle Jasper had installed those supports himself, and they had withstood 40 years of severe ice storms and summer gales. A non-compliant electrical system. The cabin's wiring had been updated in 2018 and had passed inspection without issue. Questionable foundation stability. The stone foundation was laid by skilled artisans who understood their craft, unlike the amateurs Rex likely employed. The estimated cost for repairs was $40,000. Conveniently, Rex's business card was attached to the citation. "You know," Gary remarked, feigning helpfulness. Mrs. Thornbridge indicated she might be open to buying the property in its current state, which would save you considerable trouble and cost. He offered $50,000 for a property valued at a minimum of $180,000. The insult stung more than the desert sun. That afternoon, I went directly to the VA benefits office, where I met Linda Martinez, a caseworker who genuinely grasped that veterans merit more than just empty platitudes. "Mr. Steele," You might be eligible for several programs you are not currently utilizing, she explained, arranging forms on her desk as if she were a card dealer. Disabled veteran property tax waivers, VA home renovation loans with 0% interest, and something I believe you will find particularly intriguing, historical preservation aid. The historical preservation possibility was like discovering an oasis in a wasteland. Uncle Jasper's cabin, constructed in 1965 by a Korean War veteran using conventional methods, could be eligible for protected status. And the best part was that a historical designation would render forced alterations illegal. Here is a valuable piece of information for all property owners. A historical designation can safeguard your property from mandated modernization. Consult with your local preservation authority before committing funds to undesired renovations. But the most significant progress occurred when Mavis phoned that evening, her voice filled with excitement. "Son, you need to come over immediately. Dottie Millhouse discovered something among her late husband's documents that is going to alter the entire situation." Dottie's kitchen had the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and a sense of justice. Laid out on her dining table were meeting minutes, financial statements, and letters from the past 3 years. A paper trail of corruption so extensive it would bring a forensic accountant to tears. "My Harold was very thorough with his records," Dottie explained, her instincts as a teacher still keen at 75. "He went to every HOA meeting, retained copies of every financial statement, and noted every questionable action. The evidence was undeniable. Rex's firm had received 17 separate contracts over 3 years, amounting to nearly $300,000. There were road repairs that were never finished, landscaping initiatives that were only on paper, and emergency repairs that somehow always needed Rex's particular skills. But the definitive proof was a recorded phone call from the previous month. Harold always used the speakerphone due to his hearing," Dottie said, pressing the play button on an old cassette player. "He was recording the meeting minutes when this call came in." Delilah's voice echoed through the kitchen. "Harold, I require you to alter the financial records before the annual meeting. Reallocate the payments to Rex under different headings. Make them appear as standard maintenance. I will ensure it is profitable for you. $10,000 in cash." Harold's reply was almost inaudible. "Mrs. Thornbridge, I am unable to do that. It is not lawful. It's not unlawful if no one discovers it. Consider your wife's medical expenses, Harold. Think about how costly healthcare can become." The sound of gravel crunching outside cut short our strategy session. Through Dottie's window, we saw Gary Millstone's truck pull into Uncle Jasper's driveway once more, this time with Rex's work crew. "What are they up to?" Dottie murmured. The answer was soon apparent as we observed Rex's team carrying tools towards the cabin's water supply line. 20 minutes later, they departed, leaving what seemed to be a deliberate rupture in the main water pipe. My phone buzzed with a message from Gary. "Observed further water damage during a subsequent inspection. I'm afraid this will increase the repair costs considerably." The sound of Dottie's coffee mug hitting the table was like a starting gun. These individuals were not merely corrupt. They were criminals actively damaging my property. But they had just made a critical error. Uncle Jasper had taught me that patience is more effective than force. But sometimes, the target hooks itself. It was time to start bringing them in. Dottie's hands shook as she produced a manila folder that seemed older than my military career. "Harold discovered this among your uncle's documents while helping to clear out the cabin last spring. We've been keeping it, uncertain of what to do." The document within made my breath catch. It was the original community charter from 1965, signed by 12 founding families, Jasper Steele among them. The aged parchment felt solid in my grasp, as if I were holding a fragment of history that could alter everything. "Examine Section 7, Mavis said, peering over my shoulder, her enthusiasm palpable. "Water rights. The original families had secured perpetual lake access for themselves and their descendants, entirely distinct from any subsequent property rules. Uncle Jasper had not only constructed a cabin, he had played a role in creating the legal framework for the entire community. But the most significant revelation was hidden in the details. Any substantial development impacting lake access necessitated the unanimous agreement of all founding family heirs. Not an HOA endorsement, not a community poll, unanimous agreement from the original 12 families. The faint scent of old paper blended with the coffee aroma as the gravity of the situation struck me like a shockwave. Rex's proposed marina project, the $2 million venture funded by Delilah's clandestine investors, required my approval. My approval. The approval of the troublemaking veteran they had been attempting to oust. Good heavens, I murmured, echoing Uncle Jasper's preferred phrase. She's been trying to take my property because she needs my consent for their project. Dottie nodded gravely. Harold had his suspicions. Rex has been acquiring waterfront land all around the lake, but he cannot proceed with the marina without having control over every inch of the shoreline. Your uncle's cabin was the last piece of the puzzle. The balance of power had just shifted dramatically. Delilah was not merely a power-obsessed HOA president. She was a frantic woman with a $300,000 investment that was valueless without my support. Here is an essential lesson on property rights. Water rights are frequently distinct from land ownership. Always inspect old deeds for riparian access clauses, as they could be more valuable than the property itself. How much has she already disbursed? I inquired. Mavis presented another folder. Permits, environmental assessments, architectural drawings, investor pitches. Harold figures she's already put in nearly $300,000, in addition to whatever Rex took out against his company to purchase the neighboring lands. The vibration of my phone shattered the quiet. A text message from Rex himself this time. I hear you're being difficult about some documents. Unfortunate things tend to happen to difficult people. I showed the message to Dottie and Mavis. They're becoming desperate. Desperate people do desperate things, Dottie cautioned. Harold was truly frightened near the end. He believed they might. She couldn't complete the thought, but I knew what she meant. Uncle Jasper's unexpected heart attack last spring was beginning to seem less like a natural event and more like a convenient one. An elderly veteran living by himself, obstructing a multi-million-dollar development. The bitter taste of coffee in my mouth turned metallic as I grasped the full extent of the battle I was in. This was no longer just about HOA malfeasance or property values. This was about individuals who had already transgressed boundaries that could not be reversed. We must handle this intelligently, I stated, folding the charter with care. They are unaware that we possess this document. This gives us the upper hand. What kind of upper hand? Mavis inquired. I managed to smile for the first time in weeks. The kind that transforms the hunter into the hunted. Outside Dottie's window, Willowbrook Lake shimmered in the afternoon sun. Across that water, Delilah Thornbridge was likely devising her next strategy, certain that she was still the one in charge. She was completely oblivious to the fact that the entire situation had just been turned on its head. The command center smelled of fresh coffee and righteous indignation. Mavis's kitchen table had become a strategic hub, laden with papers, charts, and evidence that would impress a military lawyer. My unit was small but formidable, a retired paralegal familiar with every legal nuance in the county, a teacher who recorded everything, and a new asset I had just brought on board. Chief Warrant Officer Maria Santos came in casual attire, yet she carried herself with the bearing of someone on active duty. We had served together in Afghanistan, and when I had reached out for assistance with a civilian bureaucratic conflict, she had driven 3 hours without hesitation. Let me understand this, Santos said, examining the evidence before us. The HOA president is misappropriating funds. Her husband is receiving contracts without competitive bidding. They intimidate residents who refuse to cooperate, and now they're attempting to evict you to push through an unlawful development project. That's the condensed version, I answered. The full story includes a potential murder. Santos gave a soft whistle. And you intend to defeat them through official means. Official means supported by military-grade precision, Mavis added. We're not merely opposing corruption. We're taking apart a criminal organization. The plan was devised like a military operation, with 4 distinct lines of attack, each aimed at exerting maximum pressure while remaining entirely within legal bounds. Legal strategy: submit formal complaints to the State Attorney General regarding HOA corruption. Demand a forensic examination of the HOA's finances. Utilize historical preservation statutes to safeguard the cabin. Enforce the founding family's water rights to halt the marina construction. Here is a piece of information every homeowner should know. State attorneys general possess oversight over HOAs. Allegations of corruption can initiate investigations that may bypass corporate protections and lead to asset freezes. Santos opened her laptop and flexed her fingers. Financial maneuvering is my area of expertise. Hand over those financial records. Financial strategy. Brock will apply for a VA home improvement loan at 0% interest. He will document property tax exemptions totaling $1,200 per year. We will trace Rex's network of shell companies to uncover money laundering activities. We will identify the financial backers of the Marina project. Here is a veteran's benefit that many overlook. Military legal aid programs offer assistance to veterans in civilian legal matters, providing free lawyers who are proficient in both military and civilian law. What about garnering community backing? Dottie inquired, her teaching background evident in her focus on forming alliances. Community strategy. Plan a heritage day to honor the founding families and the original community principles. Contact local news outlets to report on the historical preservation aspect. Form a coalition of residents who are tired of Delilah's bullying. Compile evidence of a systematic pattern of harassment targeting elderly and veteran residents. The aroma of Mavis's freshly baked cookies blended with the sound of typing as we assembled our case. Every paper was scanned, sorted, and saved to a secure online drive. Santos had taught me that in modern conflicts, digital backup is key. Intelligence strategy. Maintain constant monitoring of Rex's construction work using trail cameras provided by Santos. Keep track of attendance at HOA meetings to distinguish Delilah's allies from her opponents. Monitor property sales to understand the full extent of their development plans. They will likely intensify their actions when they discover our organization efforts, Santos cautioned. Desperate criminals do not surrender easily. Let them, I replied, feeling the presence of Uncle Jasper's purple heart in my pocket. Every action they take provides us with more proof. Luther Blackwood came in as we were putting the final touches on our plan. At 74, Uncle Jasper's fishing companion moved with deliberation but had a sharp mind. He had been observing Delilah's activities for 3 years, meticulously recording everything with the precision of a former quality control inspector. Rex's teams are fast and careless, Luther stated. I have pictures of every shortcut, every building code infringement, every instance of poor workmanship. Most of their finished projects are potential disasters. The crunch of gravel outside signaled the arrival of another person. Through the window, we observed Harold Finch walking up the path, appearing as though he bore the weight of the entire world. I can't continue with this, he said as Dottie let him in. She is threatening my wife's health insurance if I refuse to cooperate. But I cannot continue to forge documents. Harold's assistance was the final element of our strategy. Inside information on HOA activities, access to financial documents, and a first-hand account of bribery. Furthermore, he had been covertly recording their interactions for months, creating his own form of protection. We will ensure you are safe, Santos told him. But we need you to maintain your role for a short while longer. The plan was bold but feasible. 2 weeks of groundwork, community engagement, and evidence collection, followed by a very public showdown that would bring everything to light before witnesses, the media, and the authorities. Do you think it will succeed? Dottie asked as we went over the schedule. Santos smiled with the assurance of someone who had orchestrated successful missions in far more perilous situations. Ma'am, we possess legal standing, financial influence, community backing, and concrete proof of illegal acts. Additionally, we are fighting for something that truly holds significance. And what is that? Mavis inquired. Home, I stated, gazing out at the lake where Uncle Jasper had taught me that some things are worth the fight. We are fighting for home. Delilah's response started with a rap on my motel room door at 6 a.m. A man with a furtive look, dressed in a low-cost suit, presented a private investigator's license as if it were a symbol of authority. Mr. Steele, I am carrying out a background check on behalf of worried community members. Would you mind answering a few questions regarding your military history? The odor of old cigarettes and desperation surrounded him. Specifically, any events related to anger issues, substance use, or encounters with military law enforcement. I smiled with the patience Uncle Jasper had taught me during our long fishing trips. You are welcome to obtain my service record via a Freedom of Information Act request. I hope you have a pleasant day. The door shut with a solid sound, but the intent was unmistakable. Delilah was searching for information to tarnish my reputation. Unfortunately for her, 22 years in the military typically results in a spotless record. The real intensification occurred that afternoon when Harold contacted me, his voice more unsteady than his hands at HOA meetings. They proposed $10,000 for me to eliminate the financial documents, he murmured. Cash in a plain envelope, just like in a film. Did you get it on tape? Santos inquired. We had provided Harold with a digital recorder camouflaged as a hearing aid. Every single word. But that's not the most alarming part. Rex was present when she made the proposal. He mentioned that if I didn't comply, my wife might experience difficulties in obtaining her medications. He added that pharmacy systems can be quite unreliable. The taste of cheap motel coffee turned harsh as I understood we were confronting direct threats to an elderly woman's health care. These individuals had disregarded every moral boundary. That night, the acts of sabotage moved beyond damaged water lines. The sound of breaking glass roused me at 2 a.m. Uncle Jasper's cabin windows. The original handcrafted panes he had put in himself in 1965 were now shattered fragments scattered across the front porch. The words "military scum" were spray-painted on the siding in letters that seemed to bleed. But Rex had made a critical error. The trail cameras Santos had set up captured the entire event in sharp detail. "I've got him," Santos announced, examining the footage on her laptop. A clear image of his face, his license plate, and even audio of him chuckling about giving that soldier a lesson. The sound of shattered glass beneath my shoes as I assessed the destruction ignited something more intense than mere anger. This was not simply damage to property. It was a defilement of Uncle Jasper's legacy. The workshop where he had taught me to create things, the porch where he had shared stories that made military life seem honorable rather than a duty. Here is a security tip every property owner should consider. Trail cameras with night vision and mobile data capabilities can capture legally valid evidence of trespassing and vandalism. Prioritize documentation over just locks. My phone buzzed at 3 a.m. Enjoying your rest, soldier? It's a pity about those windows. Mishaps occur when people don't know their limits. Screenshot. Save. Add to the evidence file. Keep it up, Rex. Every threat you make strengthens my case. But Delilah's ultimate move revealed the extent of her desperation. "Mr. Steele?" The voice on the phone was from the VA Medical Center. "We have gotten some troubling information regarding your mental well-being. Anonymous tips imply you may pose a risk to yourself or others." "Anonymous tips?" I asked, maintaining a calm tone. "We are obligated to look into all claims concerning veterans in distress. Would you be able to come in for an assessment?" The bureaucratic process was already in motion. Someone, and we were all certain who, had used the VA's crisis intervention measures against me. Allege a veteran is unstable, initiate mandatory assessments, and build a record suggesting mental health problems. "Ma'am, I would be glad to come in for an assessment, but I will be accompanied by my lawyer and will bring evidence to show that this is harassment connected to a property disagreement." The call ended abruptly after that. Santos discovered me later that evening on Mavis's porch, looking out across the lake at Uncle Jasper's damaged cabin. The scent of pine was mixed with the diesel odor from Rex's truck, which was still in the vicinity. "They are afraid," she stated plainly. "Fearful individuals resort to desperate actions. This is no longer just about finances," I responded. "They are attempting to ruin my good name, my mental health history, my capacity to live as a veteran in the civilian world. In that case, we move up the schedule." Mavis came out with fresh coffee, her expression that of someone who had witnessed too much unfairness. "Dottie has been taking calls all day from other residents. Rex's team has punctured 3 more sets of tires, and someone has left intimidating notes for anyone who came to our heritage event. They are intimidating the whole community," Dottie added, joining us on the porch. "Mrs. Patterson from Elm Street called me in tears. They informed her that the HOA might have to reevaluate her property for compliance if she continues to associate with troublemakers." The call of a loon from across the lake served as a reminder of why Uncle Jasper had selected this location. Tranquility, community, and straightforward values that could not be bought or threatened. "It's time to put an end to this," I declared, taking out my phone to contact the one individual who could assist us in completing what we had initiated. It was time to contact the chief of police. Police Chief Maxwell Henderson possessed the kind of voice that naturally commanded respect. 30 years in law enforcement had taught him that true authority stems from competence, not from being loud. When I phoned to request a meeting about organized criminal behavior targeting veterans and senior citizens, he consented to see me right away. His office smelled of strong coffee and commitment, its walls adorned with awards and photographs from 3 decades of service. The perfectly maintained American flag in the corner spoke volumes about the man. "Mr. Steele, I've heard your name mentioned," he remarked, indicating a seat opposite his desk. "Some people are portraying you as a troublemaker, while others claim you're combating corruption. Which is it?" I laid the evidence folders on his desk, financial statements, recorded conversations, photos of the damage, and screenshots of threatening texts. "Chief, I'm a retired master sergeant who simply wants to reside quietly in my uncle's cabin. But I've uncovered something much larger." Henderson's demeanor grew more serious with each piece of evidence. The recording of the bribery attempt made him lean in. The images of Rex vandalizing my cabin caused his jaw to clench. The proof of threats against elderly residents prompted him to reach for his phone. "This is more than just HOA misconduct," he stated finally. "This is organized crime, potentially RICO Act level." But before we could formulate our next move, Delilah made her most desperate play. The notice for an emergency HOA meeting was sent by certified mail, delivered personally to every resident. An immediate vote was called for the removal of a dangerous individual from the community. The meeting was set for that Friday evening, leaving residents only 48 hours to get ready. The wording was a clear smear campaign disguised as a community safety issue. Recent events involving property damage, intimidation of residents, and verified mental health issues necessitate prompt measures to safeguard our families and property values. Santos found me later that afternoon, her laptop displaying Facebook pages that made my blood boil. Someone had created counterfeit social media profiles posting incendiary material under my name, with pictures of my cabin accompanied by captions about military compounds and veteran extremists. There were also fabricated quotes about teaching these civilians a lesson. "A professional operation," Santos noted grimly. "The person behind this is skilled in social media manipulation." The sound of gravel signaled another arrival. Luther Blackwood got out of his old pickup, moving more quickly than I had seen him in a long time. "They visited my home," he said directly. "Rex and 2 other men told me I should reevaluate my allegiances or prepare to move. At my age, and with my health expenses, I can't afford to move." The smell of oil and worn leather from Luther's work attire mixed with the now familiar scent of fear. These individuals were not just corrupt, they were organized criminals employing fear tactics against seniors. "Luther, did you manage to record any of it?" He smiled and produced his cell phone. 43 years in quality control taught me to document everything. I recorded the entire exchange, including Rex saying, and I quote, "Accidents happen to old men who don't mind their own business." That evening, the community center was filled with a palpable tension. Delilah had arranged the seating like a trial, with her allies in the front and her opponents pushed to the back. The smell of industrial cleaner mixed with nervous sweat as residents entered as if for a somber occasion. Harold sat at the treasurer's desk, looking like a man about to face execution. His eyes kept flicking toward Rex, who stood against the back wall like a bouncer. "Thank you for attending," Delilah started, her voice a mix of feigned sweetness and real hostility. "Tonight, we are here to deal with a significant danger to our community's security and principles." She had put together a presentation that would have made a propagandist proud. Manipulated photos of my cabin made it appear like a fortress. Screenshots from the fake social media accounts were shown as proof of my supposed radical beliefs. She even presented a letter from a concerned VA counselor implying I was having trouble adjusting. The entire event was a performance meant to frighten residents into voting against me without a fair hearing. But Delilah had made a critical miscalculation. She had misjudged how many people were fed up with being afraid. When she opened the floor for questions, Dottie Millhouse rose with the confidence of someone who had managed classrooms of teenagers for 4 decades. "Mrs. Thornbridge, before we proceed with any vote, I believe the community should listen to some recordings that Harold Finch has shared with me. These are recordings of conversations between you and several residents that I think everyone needs to hear." The color vanished from Delilah's face as quickly as water from a leaky container. That's a private matter. You are not allowed to." Actually, Mavis interjected, her walker tapping on the floor like a gavel. Intimidating community members and trying to bribe public officials are illegal acts, not private matters. Rex moved away from the back wall, his face red with anger and a hint of what seemed to be panic. No one is interested in your fabrications, old woman. It was at that moment that Chief Henderson entered through the main doors, his uniform sharp and his badge shining under the harsh lights. The room fell silent, the only sound being the creak of folding chairs as everyone turned to look at the entrance. The game was up. The silence in the community center was absolute. You could discern every anxious exhalation, every creak of a chair, every thumping heart as Chief Henderson's steps resonated on the linoleum. Following him were two deputies and a woman I did not know, who held a briefcase that suggested federal involvement. Ladies and gentlemen, Henderson's voice was imbued with the authority of 3 decades of public service. I must apologize for the interruption, but recent developments demand immediate police action. Delilah's expertly applied cosmetics could not conceal the panic spreading across her features. Rex, by the back wall, glanced towards the exit like a trapped creature planning its escape. Chief Henderson, this is completely out of line, Delilah stammered, her voice rising in pitch. This is an internal HOA issue. Ma'am, racketeering, embezzlement, and criminal threats are not internal issues, Henderson countered. They are serious crimes. The woman with the briefcase came forward. Agent Sarah Chun, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have been looking into allegations of systemic fraud affecting homeowners associations in this area. Mr. Steele's evidence has been invaluable. I rose to my feet, allowing my dress uniform to convey its message before I spoke. 22 years of service medals, combat awards, and the quiet self-respect that comes from dedicating oneself to something greater. Friends, I began, I did not seek out this conflict. My only wish was to honor the memory of my Uncle Jasper by residing peacefully in the home he built. But when criminals endanger our community, veterans do not retreat. A murmur of unease filled the room as Henderson gestured to the back. Rex was inching towards the exit, but Deputy Martinez had already blocked his path. Before we adjourn, I went on, producing the original 1965 community charter. There is something this community should understand about their legal standing. Delilah gasped audibly as she saw the document that would unravel her entire plot. This charter, endorsed by the founding families, including my Uncle Jasper, confers water rights that take precedence over any HOA rule. Mrs. Thornbridge's marina project has been unlawful from the start. That's not possible, Rex snapped from the back. We checked everything. You checked everything except for the original founding papers, Agent Chun stated coolly. Did your research show that your proposed development infringes on federal waterway laws, state environmental regulations, and the initial community charter? Harold Finch, finding his nerve, stood up at the treasurer's table. His hands were trembling, but his voice was firm. I have recordings, he declared to the room. Recordings of Mrs. Thornbridge offering me money to alter HOA financial statements. Recordings of threats to my wife's health care if I refused to cooperate. The sound of his phone connecting to the center's audio system filled the space. Delilah's voice was perfectly clear. Harold, I need you to alter the financial records before the annual meeting. Reallocate the payments to Rex under different headings. Make them appear as standard maintenance. I will ensure it is profitable for you. $10,000 in cash. The room was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Then, a low murmur began to swell as the residents grasped that they had been living under a criminal regime disguised as community governance. Furthermore, I added, my voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded in battle. We possess video proof of Mr. Thornbridge damaging my property, photographic evidence of financial misconduct exceeding $300,000, and records of systematic intimidation of elderly and veteran residents. Rex then made his move, lunging for the exit, but Chief Henderson's voice stopped him instantly. Rex Thornbridge, you are being arrested for vandalism, criminal intimidation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The sharp click of handcuffs echoed in the quiet room like a judge's gavel. Delilah made one final, desperate attempt. This is a setup. We are respectable business owners working to better our community. Ma'am, Agent Chin cut in, misappropriating HOA funds, threatening senior citizens, and filing false police reports are not business enhancements. They are federal offenses. Chief Henderson took a step forward, and something extraordinary occurred. This man, who had served the community for 30 years, stood at attention and gave a flawless military salute. Master Sergeant Steele, on behalf of this community and in tribute to your uncle's service, I commend you for your bravery in uncovering this criminal network. The room erupted in applause. Residents who had been silenced by fear for months began to cheer. Elderly neighbors who had been too afraid to speak out now found their voices. The sound of sincere relief and appreciation filled the room like a breath of fresh air. Delilah Thornbridge, Henderson stated, "You are being arrested for embezzlement, conspiracy, and violating fair housing laws. You have the right to remain silent." As the handcuffs were secured, I surveyed the room, seeing faces that had been etched with fear for far too long. Uncle Jasper would have been pleased. Sometimes, confronting bullies does more than just protect one person. It safeguards an entire community. "Friends," I said as the perpetrators were taken away, "let's go home." For the first time in a long while, those words truly held their meaning. Saturday morning broke bright and lovely over Willowbrook Lake. And for the first time in a long while, I woke up in Uncle Jasper's cabin. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the fragrance of pine drifting through windows that community members had voluntarily replaced the day before. The calls of loons across the calm water served as a reminder of why this place had always felt like home. The community gathering that took place after Delilah's arrest was an event Uncle Jasper would have cherished. Neighbors who had been too intimidated to interact for months came out of their homes with tools, paint, and food. Luther Blackwood managed the flow of people while Mavis, with the skill of a retired paralegal accustomed to managing disorder, organized the work teams. Jasper's nephew shouldn't have to clean up this mess by himself, Dottie declared, using a paintbrush as a tool against unfairness. By dusk, all signs of the damage had been removed, and in their place were upgrades that paid tribute to the cabin's history rather than erasing it. The legal consequences were immediate and gratifying. Rex's construction business crumbled after forensic accountants found he had been operating a fraudulent scheme with loans and falsified contracts. He received a 3-year sentence in federal prison and was ordered to make restitution to every homeowner he had swindled. Delilah was sentenced to 5 years for her involvement in the conspiracy and was permanently barred from holding any leadership role in an HOA. But the most significant triumph was what we created from the aftermath. The Uncle Jasper Memorial Scholarship was established 3 months later, financed by the recovered HOA funds and contributions from the community. Each year, it assists the children of military personnel with their college education, upholding the principles Uncle Jasper had defended in Korea and embodied at this lake. The inaugural scholarship was awarded to Maria Santos's daughter, who has aspirations of studying environmental law. The most crucial legal insight from this entire experience is this: in property conflicts, document everything. Photographs, recordings, and eyewitnesses are what win legal battles. But more importantly, they shield entire communities from organized criminals. The yearly Veterans Day fishing competition has become Willowbrook Lake's most prominent community gathering, attracting contestants from 3 counties and generating funds for veteran support services. Chief Henderson always officiates as the honorary starter, and the winner's trophy is inscribed with Uncle Jasper's motto: "Patience lands more fish than commotion." My boat repair service developed naturally from assisting neighbors with engine troubles and dock restorations. It turns out that military maintenance expertise is highly applicable in civilian life when serving individuals who value integrity. The workshop where Uncle Jasper taught me to be resourceful has become a social hub where stories are exchanged and issues are resolved. The combat-related stress that had lingered since my deployments began to fade in ways that medical treatment never could. The support of the community, engaging work, and the tranquility that comes from safeguarding something precious proved to be more effective than any medication. Perhaps the most fulfilling result was seeing democracy function as intended. The new HOA board, chosen by actual residents rather than appointed by developers, conducts its affairs with full transparency. There are monthly financial disclosures, competitive bidding for all contracts, and a fundamental principle: no one is permitted to intimidate another. Property values stabilized once the corruption was eradicated and the community's good name was restored. Young families started to move in, drawn by the prospect of affordable lakeside homes and a neighborhood where people genuinely look out for one another. The blend of veterans, retirees, and working families fostered the kind of community Uncle Jasper had envisioned. 6 months after that tumultuous meeting, I got a letter from the state attorney general's office. Our situation had prompted new laws to enhance housing protections for veterans and increase oversight of HOAs. Sometimes, one individual's struggle for fairness has far-reaching effects. The smell of barbecue smoke wafting across the lake now signals another community event where former adversaries have become friends and shared challenges have forged strong bonds. Uncle Jasper's Purple Heart is displayed prominently on the mantelpiece, encircled by photos of the extended family this community has become. There is discussion about other veterans encountering similar struggles in developments across the state. A support system is emerging, composed of people who realize that resisting bullies is not just about self-preservation. It's about protecting all who follow. Heritage is important. History is important. And at times, defending both demands the same bravery our forebears demonstrated in their service.